Yo, what's up, everybody? Today we're going to be having a look at the ToolkitRC M8 multifunctional charger. So this is a small charger. It's marketed as not just a charger. It's supposed to do a bunch of other things. It's also a battery checker, a servo tester, a receiver tester, you can use it as a constant amperage power supply. You can use it as to charge your USB devices. So it kind of does a lot of things, which is neat. It's really nice to be able to carry a product around that can do multiple things instead of having to carry a field charger and a battery checker and whatever. You've kind of got something here that covers a lot of bases. So there's one piece of kit that everybody kind of needs in their bag. And when I first started out, I used something like this. Basically what we're talking about is battery checkers here, right? You need something to be able to kind of check on the voltage of your pack. So this is kind of what a lot of people start out with. It's really, really cheap. You plug a battery in and it tells you the voltage. This is the ISDT BG8S, and the real benefit of this for me was the fact that you had a USB port on here and you could charge USB devices off of a LiPo. So if you're in the field and like you wanted to charge your GoPro, you could plug a LiPo into here, turn on the USB function, plug your USB cable in, and go. It also does a couple other things that a normal battery checker doesn't do, like it'll balance the batteries for you. Although, using a product like this to balance and not just balancing while you charge, I don't really know if there's much of a benefit to that anymore, but it's there. And you can get some other cool info about your battery, and it's pretty accurate. And this is a great battery checker. But this doesn't do a couple of things. This, by the way, I think will also test a receiver or servo. But this isn't a charger, which is okay. That's where this kind of comes in. This will do everything that this does, as well as obviously everything that this does. What is the deal? Which one should you carry in your bag? Obviously, at around $40, this does it all. So this can be your little field charger. You just need to apply some power here. You can plug it into like a big field charging battery or a power supply. So this will charge. You can also use this as a battery checker and a bunch of other stuff that these things don't do. In fact, this does quite a few things that a normal hobby charger won't do as well. So there's definitely the most functionality here. But we're going to kind of take a look at whether this is actually practical as your main battery checker. And if you don't have a battery checker yet and you're looking for a field charger, or even a charger you want to use at home, the only caveat is with this, obviously it doesn't have a built-in power supply, so there's no way to plug this into like your AC outlet. You would need to provide an external power supply when you're using this charger. First, we'll start out and kind of testing these guys as have the functionality for a battery checker, because I guess my point is, like, if this is as good as a battery checker as this guy is, then there's kind of no reason to have anything like this anymore. But we're gonna see in a second, so we'll kind of run this down. This thing, which you can buy anywhere for like $1 or $2, very simple. You plug the battery in, it makes a loud beeping noise. I've filled the holes of my little speakers up with hot glue, so it's not that loud. And you wait a second, and it'll tell you 4 cells. And then all the cells combined is 15.2, and then you'll get each cell individually, and you kind of got to wait a couple of minutes before, to get, not a couple of minutes, you got to wait while this cycles to get all the info. So this is definitely usable as a battery checker. It's cheap. You can buy a bunch of these and kind of have them all over the place. This definitely gets the job done. Going on to the BG8S, same idea here. You got your balance port on the bottom. You plug your balance cable in. And what's neat about this is you get all your information right away when you plug in. So the minute you plug that balance cable in, you're going to be able to see all the cells at once without having to wait for them to cycle through. And you've actually got 3 decimal places it goes to, so you can really accurately see where your cells are at. You also got some nice info here on the left, like tells you got a 4S LiPo. And that what you won't get on like a battery checker like this is you have this like fuel gauge or estimated remaining capacity. So this battery is charged at about 35%. This works awesome as a battery checker. The other thing you can do with this that's kind of cool is you can just plug the XT60 in very quickly. And you won't obviously see any cell voltage or any other information than just the main voltage here in the top left corner. And that's okay because, for a really quick check of, oh man, I can't remember if this battery is charged or not, whatever. You can get a really fast, this is the fastest way, like even this one, right? You can't plug this part in, which is fine. But even if I plug this in, I have to wait before it'll tell me all. And now I can see the voltage versus, you know, this guy, you just plug it in and boom, 15.3. From a battery checker standpoint, for that very, very basic functionality, I think that this is an awesome little battery checker. And then the winner with this one, the real winning feature is the ability to charge a USB device. So that's pretty simple. You just plug in your XT60, and you should probably, quick tip here, if you're using one of these things, plug in the balance lead as well so the battery knows, the battery checker knows what the battery is, so that when you USB charge it won't overdraw on your battery, if that makes sense. So once you've got your battery plugged in, you just plug any device into your USB port here on the side, and you are good to go. You can charge a GoPro or whatever cable you want will go in there, and it does support, I think it supports fast charging as well, although I don't have any devices that have that. So this is a really, really useful thing. It's kind of pricey for a battery checker, so I think it's around $30. It might be a little bit cheaper, but for $10 more, you can have this, right, which should perform the duties of both of these guys, plus give you charge functionality. It's a little bit bigger than the BG8S, a little bit thicker, but that's okay because you want things like fans. It does have these nice little feet on the bottom. It feels really stable. Weight-wise, it's heavier than this, but I mean, this is definitely something you can easily keep in your bag, right? If it's going to do everything you need it to do. So the first test I want to perform here is, let's use it as a battery checker, right? So you saw how the other two worked. Let's plug our balance lead in and see what's up. All right, so the first thing that I was disappointed to see when I first tried this out is when you plug your balance lead in, the device does not power up. So you can't do a quick battery check just by plugging in the balance lead like you could on any other battery checker. So already from a battery checker standpoint, not so great. If we just plug the XT60 in, we get nothing. So for this to work as a battery checker, you have to plug both of these leads in, and that's kind of annoying. That means, you know, in reality, in my opinion, that's kind of the deal breaker from this thing actually being useful as a battery checker, is that I have to plug both in. And here we go, it'll power on, and what do we got here? We got the voltage, we get all the cells, and we get the temperature of, I would guess it's the internal temperature of the charger. You don't get as many decimal points as you do with the BG8S, but you can see all the voltages of the cells all at once instead of having to wait for them to cycle like you do on this guy. You can also balance the battery from right here if you wanted to. So you've got mode, voltage. You also can test the internal resistance here, and this is nice. This is something that you cannot do on the BG8S, but you can do on most chargers. I'll show you that in a sec because there's an interesting kind of catch with doing that as well. But like I said, you can go to voltage, or I can come over here and I can do, well, normally you'd be able to do balancing, you think, but again, with some of the functions on here, you have to like plug more stuff in. So let's go back to the BG8S for a second because I want to show you something. So to balance cells on this guy, I've got to plug the balance plug in, and I've got to plug the XT60 in. And then if I want to balance, I can balance. I don't need to plug anything else into this, right? So if we're here, and I plug my battery in to check it, and now I decided, again, this is not really something I don't think people actually do, but I can't balance my battery without plugging another battery into the input side. So let's go ahead and power this thing and with another battery, and now I can balance my cells. So that's kind of like a standard charger, right? You would need to power your charger from your power supply or however that works before you can balance something. But you know, you don't need to do that with this guy. Yeah, as as a straight up battery checker, like if you told me that when I went out to the field that I was just gonna bring this guy and not one of these guys, I don't know if I'd be super happy about that, simply because this is, this is already big for a battery checker, but this is even bigger. To pull this thing out, and every time I want to quickly check a battery, to have to plug both the leads in just to get to here. The other thing too, this guy's got a color screen, so if you can live with this as your main battery checker, then great. But so far, for functionality wise, I think on the battery checker functionality, this guy wins. Let's move on to the next thing that this thing can do. The other main way I use this, like I mentioned before, is I like to charge, the USB charging, which is freaking awesome. Let's say I need to charge a GoPro or my little FPV screen watch, whatever you want to call it. All you have to do is plug the XT60 in and press USB charge. I do recommend connecting the balance lead as well. That way you'll get like a little alarm, and this will stop charging before it destroys your LiPo, or you go under voltage there. Plug your USB device in that you want to charge. All right, and we're charging, and that's cool. You can even see the voltage, how many amps it's charging the USB device on. And yeah, so this works really well. So let's see if we wanted to do the same thing with the ToolkitRC M8. What's interesting about this thing is you have this input XT60 and the output XT60 and the USB, but I find that like the ports can work for either power in or power out, which makes me a little bit nervous, but I guess as long as the device knows what's going on, it's okay. So you would think this obviously will work. So we'll plug our input power in, right? And right away, we don't have to do anything else. You can just plug in the USB port is hot right away. So you just plug in your USB device and boom, it's charging. But the problem is M8 right now, the device doesn't know how many cells are in this battery because the battery lead's not connected. So it's not going to turn off before it, over discharges the battery. So what happens if we try to plug in the balance lead and the main lead? Is the USB port hot still from this side? And interestingly enough, it is. So this is supposed to be the output port, but we're pulling power in here. And I guess as long as the device knows how to manage that, my concern would be like somehow, I don't know, like shorting the battery out by like plugging things in a combination where you have, I don't know. I guess it's okay. I guess the thing is just, it strikes me as kind of weird. Usually you don't have ports that kind of work both ways. So I haven't actually tried to charge something long enough to see what happens with this when the LiPo gets low voltage, if it stops charging like the BG8S does. The problem is there's no real menu or anything for me to go into here to set like a cutoff voltage while this is powered in. I could, and again, see, here's this is input power right now. This is powering the thing. Like what? I mean, does it blow up if I plug a battery in here? Like what happens? This is what makes me kind of nervous about this thing. And yeah, I guess now I can, let me see. Oh, okay. So I take that back. You can go, no. See, I can't go back out to the main menu right now. This is basically locked into the battery measure, right? So now I apply power here, and it will let me go out to the main menu to check things like output or settings. So let's go to settings and input power, lowest input 12 volts, safe charge now, discharge mode, and we'll get to that in a sec. But yeah, as a US, I don't know how's it gonna know when to stop charging. I guess if I have lowest input is 12 volts, but that's too low for a 4S battery. Functionality here, like, I don't know, and This thing does have upgradable firmware, but to me, if I'm going to use this thing to charge a USB device, like a lot of times when I'm charging, I'm using batteries that I've already flown with, and I really want the device to kind of stop charging when it gets to a certain point. But back to what I was saying before. So this is really interesting. So remember before when I only had the battery connected here, I couldn't use the menus? Well, now if I'm in the menu and I unplug this battery, I still have the menu. So like what's up with that? I don't the functionality is very I don't know. The ISDT stuff is very intuitive the way it works. It has a color screen, like everything makes sense. Like to me, this just doesn't make sense. I don't think it's a problem, but so check this out. If I go back into Measurer and go into the battery tester menu, which is where you normally would be if you just plug this in, now I can't leave until I plug this in again. And now I can leave. So I don't know. All right, so we got off kind of on a big tangent here. The bottom line is using this thing as a USB, charger USB devices. I don't know of the point of plugging the balance cable in other than to kind of so you can monitor the cells. So yeah, you could just plug a XT60 into either port and plug your USB device in, and USB is hot. So this is actually easier to use than this, where you have to go into a menu and turn USB charge on. But I'm not 100% sold that this is better because of the fact that I guess I can set the input voltage cutoff, which again, I can't do unless I have something plugged in up here instead. Set this to something like so when this gets down to 15.2 volts, I just set the lowest input voltage at 15.2, but that's on the input side. So let's see, we'll wait a few minutes here and we'll see what happens when this gets down to 15.2 volts, and we'll see if it cuts off. All right, so the overall voltage of the battery has dropped below 15.2 and the charger's still running. So let's see if I move this battery over to the other side, what happens. Lowest input 15.2. And I don't, in this situation, like, I don't know what we're seeing this voltage of, if it's the device I'm charging. Yeah, so not so sure what's up with that. I guess I'll have to try to plug a 4S battery into here and charge something and keep an eye on it and see what happens when the the cell voltage gets down to like 3.5 or 3.2, if it cuts off or what. So far, as far as a USB charger thingy goes, the BG8S wins there, but you can do definitely usable. All right, so let's move on because there's really, the idea that this thing even has that functionality is pretty good. Oh, something else I want to show you, just out of curiosity here. I can power the charger up through the USB ports. This is just like an external one of those battery bank things. And if I plug, yeah. So this is kind of weird because I don't know what, if, I guess you can maybe do like the servo. Now I can't even exit this back to the, again, like, again, why this works this way, I guess, well, we're going to do the firmware update. I'm going to hear it together in a little bit, and maybe the reason why this has to power this is so that when you plug in this USB cable to your PC, the device can be on to receive the firmware update. Why it doesn't have a separate micro USB port like a device normally would for input and a full size for output. I don't know. I guess it doesn't hurt anything. It just, again, leads to confusion because you can't actually like do anything here. All right, so let's move on to some of the things that this thing does that these other two guys don't. So to be fair, so far the BG8S has won the battery checker test. It's won the USB charging test, but now there's a whole slew of things that the M8 does that neither of these guys do. From this point on, we'll be talking about how this kind of works as a charger and some of the other features. So we're going to plug some input voltage in here. So this would be your power supply or, you know, whatever it is you want to use to power this thing up. And let's just start with basic charging. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to show you the internal resistance checker, which is kind of cool. So we're going to plug our brand new Funfly in here, and I like to, when I get a new battery, check out what the IR is. So we're going to go to, by the way you operate this thing is really straightforward. You kind of just turn this click wheel, and there's a button in the middle, a lot like a Taranis QX7 or an old iPod, and then your exit or back button is here. So we're just going to select measure and go down to battery, internal resistance, and hit OK. Then go down to test and hit OK. And here we have the internal resistance of each cell in the battery. Testing internal resistance is cool. It's typically something you need to do on a charger. Most chargers can do it. Charging, pretty straightforward. It works on profiles, so you have to select a profile, or you could just use one profile and change it. So you've got your charge voltage, so 4.2 per cell for standard. If you wanted to set this up to something higher, you could. You can go up to 4.25, and then it does support HV as well, so you can change it to LiPo HV, and then you get 4.35 and another 0.5 volts to play with if you'd like to overcharge your batteries and be risky like that. But we're just going to go with the standard LiPo, and you do have LiPo high voltage, LiFe, nickel metal hydride, lead, kind of the normal, I guess, array of batteries that you can typically charge. Of course, the only thing I'm really concerned with is LiPo and LiPo HV. And so what's cool about this is it does automatically know that this is a 4S battery based on the balance lead being plugged in, which is cool. But if you wanted to manually set this to something else, and it does charge all the way down to 1S. This is a 4S here, so I'm just going to leave it at auto. And we'll go all the way up to 8S, so it's pretty cool. And then you set your, just like any other charger, your discharge current. And there's two ways you can discharge a battery. You can do regenerative discharging, which is where you discharge a battery and it charges the input battery if you wanted to do that, or it'll just do internal where it'll just blow off it'll just discharge the battery, convert it to heat, and the fans will probably kick on real loud. We can try that in a second. But you have storage charge here as well, which is nice. So very standard kind of functionality. Press charge to 16.8, okay, and we're charging. And we can see the voltage of the cells, the main voltage, the charge current, the consumption in watts, the internal temperature of the charger, the time charged, and the amount charged. So pretty standard stuff. You can also scroll through here. So here's the charge program, 4S LiPo at 1.6 amps. This is that's probably the voltage of the input battery. And the fans just kicked on. That's pretty cool. They move a lot of air. They make some noise. And, ooh, now it's really ramping up. Okay. So what we'll do is we're actually going to swap the batteries around and run it in discharge mode and see how loud and hot this thing will get. So yeah, basic charge functionality is normal. Hit exit to stop. And what we're going to do for now is let's go back to charger, and we're going to go to discharge to, and it'll tell you what voltage to put it to. I don't ever really discharge. Let's go to storage. It'll discharge the battery anyway. So this battery is at 16.62 volts. And we can see our, so this battery is powering, and that's the input voltage here. This is the voltage of this battery. And we'll see what rate it actually discharges for us. So my Q200, which is my main big charger that I use at home, will do discharging at 0.6 amps. This one does, it looks like it kind of wants to do 0.8 amps. Maybe the temperature is controlling that, but that's a little bit faster than my big charger, so that's interesting. Here are the fans coming on. Wow, so these fans, they must be pretty confident these fans can move some air. They're loud. I mean, things are really spinning. These two fans on the top, that's cool. And they seem to be keeping the device kind of cool. Let's see how, if we can discharge at a faster rate if we change over to, we're going to change to recycle discharge mode, which basically means when we discharge one battery, we're putting the voltage back into the other one. Alright, that's kind of crazy, so we'll go there. Well, no, we don't want to be putting 6 amps back in. Okay, we'll put this down to 2 amps. I don't want to blow a bunch of amps into the input battery. So, we're just curious how high it will go here. And we'll go to discharge. Input limit 15.6 volts. Okay, so I'm really curious. Yeah. So this is the voltage of this battery. This is the voltage of this battery. That can be kind of confusing. And we can get 2 amps that way. Yeah, so obviously we're not, the power is flowing from this battery to this battery, but this is not like balance charging this battery because the balance lead here of the input battery is not connected. So I don't recommend allowing it to go all the way up to 16.8 because who knows how, if you're not getting one of these cells higher than the other. But the regenerative discharge works, and it seems to work well. And yeah, I'm really curious as to what the maximum, just for the hell of it, for a moment. Okay, so that's pretty cool. So if you had a really big, chunky, humongous, like field charging pack that you wanted to use, and maybe you came back from the field and that was dead, and when you go to discharge or store charge your batteries, you can regeneratively charge. That's pretty cool. That's something that a lot of chargers don't do. Okay, so we'll get out of this one. And that basically covers everything in the charging section. So we're going to go to measure, and this is where you can test your different receivers. So I'm not going to do this because for mini quad pilots, I don't really feel there's a lot of usefulness to this. Although I guess once in a while, if you had to test a receiver, it would be nice to have a tool that could do it. And this could do it. By the way, this is something also you can do with the BG8S as well. You can plug a receiver right into this kind of integrated balance port. On this device, on the M8, you have a port there, with a 3-pin servo that you plug your receiver or whatever into. Test PWM and PPM receivers, which I would never probably do in my life. You can also test S-bus receivers. This is the battery tester, and this is some kind of current tester, and basically you can, I don't even know exactly how this works. I'd have to look it up, and it would make me nervous kind of doing this, but you could connect an ESC somehow. I'd have to figure out how this worked. Where would you connect, and how would you connect the ESC? I don't really know, and I would be afraid to use this anyway. So let's go on to output, and you can, again, this is related to receivers, so you can tell the M8 to output a PWM or PPM or S-bus signal, and then if you wanted to test like a servo, or provide a receiver output to test, I guess, like a flight control or something. Again, these are cool functions to have, and I guess why not include them if the device is able to do them. But for flying mini quads, I don't think you maybe use these. Maybe if you were doing like an airplane or a wing, these can help you out, to setting up servos, but don't really care about these that much. So seems pretty cool. You can just kind of set your different output values for each channel, I guess, and output this to a servo or whatever to see. But moving on, this is the power supply. So I'm going to unplug this battery here. Again, this is what makes me nervous about this thing. It's like you can plug things in or out, and I don't know where power is going to come in or out of, so we're just going to use this. So you can set a bench power supply. You can, I think you have presets here. So you've got like the Mavic or the Mavic S. So this would be if you wanted to, supply a like a DC charger with a I guess these are settings for that, like if you were using like a DC Mavic charger or something. Or you could just set custom and set your voltage. And I wish you could, okay, you can move this thing faster. It's a little bit tight, so it feels weird. So you can do up to 30 volts at 8 amps. And it's working, I guess, and I'm guessing the output's coming here, the DC output. So if you needed to run something off a power supply, this could double, obviously with it's kind of interesting because, like, if you're running this thing off a power supply, you don't need it to be a power supply, but I guess you could turn a LiPo battery into a constant output power supply. So there could be functionality there again. Will I ever use that? Who knows? But it's nice to, I guess, have that. So the cool thing about this, I guess, if ever in the future you found you needed that functionality, maybe whether you can think of a reason for it now or not, you have it in this thing. So it definitely does more than any other kind of charger or battery tester out there in terms of being complete. How much you may use some of these additional things, I don't know. I guess it depends. If you're flying mini quads, I don't really see you using most of them. And but it's nice to have them there, so that's pretty cool. And at a price of about $40, can't beat that. So we'll go into settings and we'll take a look. So you've got lowest input, input wattage if you wanted to change this. Not sure why you would need to reduce that, but it's there. Safe temperature, so if you're worried about this thing blowing up, I guess you can tell it to shut off at a lower temperature. By default, that's set to 70 degrees Celsius, which seems hot. I don't know. I'm in the US, so we don't know. We're stupid when it comes to, but I think 70 degrees is, I don't know. I'll put a conversion right here. I have no idea. Safe charge time, so this is the time limit when you're charging, so it'll charge for 2 hours and stop. Discharge mode, we went over that. S-bus value, with or original, no idea what that means. You can adjust the backlight here, and this thing is very visible in light, so that's good. But if you want to make it brighter, like on a bright day, you can even see the screen. It's not color, but the visibility is great. You can do contrast here as well. The screen kind of reminds me a lot of like a Taranis screen, actually, in terms of the way it is. So that's cool. You can change the not the loudness, but the make songs with this thing. It'll be, I guess that's how long before it. Hub support. Oh no, don't change the language to something I can't read. Hub support, I don't know. And you can change everything to defaults, which I'm going to do right now because I messed around with some of the settings and I don't want this thing to blow up. And that's about it for what it does. You are provided with it's USB, these are rare, USB A to A, so you can plug this into here and this in the computer, and I guess that's because they didn't want to put a micro USB port, which is okay. I'll go over right now with you guys on the firmware updating process. I haven't done it yet, so we'll do it together and we'll see how it goes. Alright, so I tried to do this on my desktop PC and it would not recognize the USB drive, which is I guess the way this has to work. So we're going to try it again here. I know this is kind of a crappy way to show this. I normally would use a screen recorder, but yeah, it just won't work on my desktop. So we're going to go to M8 and download, and we're going to download the zip file. Pretty straightforward. And the README. Okay, so connect the USB cable, and this was running, I think, 1.15 before, so we're going to plug our little USB cable in, and nothing on here, but we did get the toolkit drive did show up. We're going to take the file we just downloaded, app.upgrade or whatever this is, and we're going to put it inside, I guess, internal memory of the, okay. Have to delete this one first and install this one. Please work. There we go. And I guess that's it. Power interface increases the LiPo SoC power display. The charging interface increases LiPo. Optimize the false positives of number 13. Optimize the end of the lithium iron. Battery charging, and the voltage rises to high 5 PWM cycles, just restore multi-lamps for users consistently. After this version of the system, okay, so looks like this is just quality of life stuff. Let's see if anything looks different on here. I don't remember that being there before we did the firmware upgrade. I'll have to go back and look at the video. So this little charge, overall charge. The bottom line about this thing, for $40, you get what seems like a pretty decent like field charger or pocket charger, whatever you want to call it. It does have nice fans, so it should stay pretty cool. It does do all the kind of normal things you'd want a charger to do. So as a charger, I'd say it's a thumbs up. As for, you know, battery checker, like, yeah, it'll check your battery and balance your battery, and you can check your IR, your battery, but probably would still, even if I carry this with me, I probably would still carry this guy with me as well, just because this is a little bit easier to use. For USB charging, this seems to work okay. You get a lot of different functions here with this at, you know, the equivalent kind of charger, the competing chargers for this would be like the ISDT Q6, which I think those go for around $50 or $60, so this is cheaper than that. With the Q6, you do get a color display, but you don't quite get as much functionality, and it's about the same size as that. So I had kind of been looking for a little charger to keep in my field kit. Not that I do a ton of charging in the field, but it is nice to have this in case of an emergency or a long day. You can, you know, power it off a car battery or something like that if you have the right connectors, or a big battery, and, you know, charge up some batteries like fuel gauge or whatever to let you know how far along the charge is. That's pretty cool. I think they just put that in, so that's nice to have, actually, so you can kind of see how far along the battery is. That's pretty cool though. So yeah, so like I said, very useful, versatile kind of, what is this IF lamp? Battery cell. Okay, thank you. That's what I was waiting for. And it still attempts to charge, or what is it doing? Oh, I guess it's just slowed. I wonder what the F means. Yeah, a little bit weird with this thing, but maybe over time they'll, you know, make it a little bit easier to understand. It's not horrible, not as intuitive as this, but Toolkit is kind of the right name for this thing, because it is kind of like a bag of tricks all in one little device here. Definitely, if you're looking for, you know, a field charger or something, another charger to run it at home, and you have a power supply to run a charger already, or, you know, maybe you're building some kind of little box, charging box or something. definitely the price is right, and the value proposition, what you're getting for your money here, is pretty good. And it's nice. It's put together nice. The click wheel feels nice. The screen's not color, but whatever. The buttons feel good, and they seem to be adding things to the firmware as we go along. As far as the specs go, it is 300 watts or 15 amps, 1 to 8S, so about on par with like a little Q6 or other chargers in this size. So yeah, check it out. I'll put some links down below where you can get this thing for, like I said, around 40 bucks. If you're going to compare it directly to like a ISDT Q6, it does a little bit more, and it's a little bit cheaper. It just lacks the color screen. Something else to note, like these screens on all these things are made of plastic, so they scratch like the minute you touch them, which you might be able to see if I power this thing off. So I haven't had this thing that long, and so don't worry about that. It doesn't really affect the viewability of the screen. It just kind of looks ugly. So I know they sell like screen protectors for this. I don't even bother with that. This is just going to get scratched, and it's not really going to affect the functionality of it. But these plastic screens are pretty durable, so they shouldn't break. They just kind of scratch the minute you touch them up. So that's it. It's the ToolkitRC M8. So you get it in white or black. This is the white one. And yeah, 40 bucks. Check it out. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one.